All right, team, welcome to another episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Matt Hamilton, delighted to have your company. And today we're going to talk about how to tap into the competitive spirit of our team to drive performance. This is something that I've used to great success over the years to boost performance. It's especially useful when you've got a group of people that appear to be lagging a little behind the rest, and you want to see if you can get them up to speed to bring them up as well. But as we always do, let's have a look at a real-world example. This example is from a company called Salesforce, and I really like the way that they harness competitiveness to drive performance. They're a really good example, actually, of a company that does this, especially within its sales teams. So here's a bit of a deeper look into the key points that Salesforce uses to motivate people from a competitive perspective and hopefully to help them achieve high performance levels. All right, so the first is sales contests and incentives, and I love this. So what they do is quarterly and annual sales contests. So they'll regularly organise sales contests that encourage employees to meet and exceed their targets, and these contests often have specific performance goals, like acquiring new customers or upselling to existing clients. And all these details are logged, of course, over the year. And employees or teams that achieve the highest sales numbers are awarded prizes, bonuses, and recognition, which is pretty cool. So recognition might be, for example, the top performers in those contests will be featured in company communications or on internal leaderboards or even at company-wide events. And this public recognition for Salesforce seems to drive healthy competition as the employees strive to outperform their peers for recognition. The second thing they focus on is the gamification of sales targets, which is another one that I really like. And they do this with leaderboards. So Salesforce will use leaderboards to publicly track and display the performance of sales results for employees. And the leaderboards might focus on a few different metrics, but the main ones are revenue generated, number of deals closed, or the value of each deal. And it creates a sense of competition where sales representatives are motivated to climb the ranks and to be seen as top performers. So it's structured almost like a game, which I think is pretty cool. They've really doubled down on this. They've actually started offering badges and achievements as well. So employees can earn badges, or rather gamified style rewards for hitting certain milestones. This might be something like closing out a significant deal or achieving a specific revenue goal. And these achievements are often celebrated on those internal platforms we spoke about just a moment ago, which makes it more competitive and enjoyable for people at work because they feel like they're playing a game as opposed to just rocking up and doing the same thing over and over again on a 9-to-5 basis. And then, of course, comes the commission and bonus structure. So performance-based compensation is a thing at Salesforce. They have a really strong commission structure that's tied directly to the sales performance. So, i.e., the more a salesperson sells, the higher their earnings. And this creates direct competition among employees to generate more sales and motivate them to close bigger deals. But they also cater for accelerators and overachievers. All right, so they've got those two categories. So Salesforce has accelerators in place, and that is essentially for salespeople who exceed their quota. They can earn higher commission rates for any sales made above and beyond their goal. And that encourages people to not just meet their targets, but to exceed them and to continue pushing beyond their limits. And the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because this is applicable for all of us. What you'll find as a leader of people is that oftentimes it's a little difficult to motivate some of your staff. You'll find that you have some really high performers that really don't seem to need much coaching at all. Then you'll have others who seem to lag behind a little bit and don't really get into it as much as everybody else. Now look, we know motivation levels vary, but we also got to confront the reality, which is that for a lot of people who come to work 9 to 5, they don't really have any big goals or aspirations. They're doing it because they have to. They're not doing it because they're super passionate about the job. They're not particularly driven. They're doing it because they have bills to pay and a mortgage to pay, and this is essentially their best shot at doing that. So oftentimes people are not particularly passionate about their work, and that's a reality that we need to face as people leaders. Work can often be repetitive and mundane as well. So you can understand how it's a little difficult for people to find real enjoyment if their work is particularly unrewarding or not particularly rewarding. And maybe it's a little difficult for them to get passionate if they're bored out of their brains all day. But here's another big one that I just wanted to set the scene with as well. When the work is sort of more low level and mundane like that, a lot of people don't understand how their work impacts the big picture within a company. So they might go, well, okay, yeah, sure, we're talking about KPIs and how long it takes to, for example, respond to a work order, fix the work order and close the work order. That might be a good example to use. Yeah, maybe we're talking about something as simple as a light bulb, that is out in a hospital, for example. And if your job is to go and change the light globe and then your boss is saying, hey, you didn't respond to that work order in time, a lot of these employees might think, well, what's the big deal? It's a light bulb. It can be helpful to explain to them, though, how the timely completion of that work order dramatically impacts the perception the customer has of the business as a whole. If you have a light globe that's been out for a month, you're going to be thinking from a customer perspective, well, these guys can't even manage to change a light globe. A simple little thing like that. If you can't get the small things right, how can you get the big things right? And if the, let's say, electrician in this case understands that, well, actually, the small things I do on a day-to-day basis actually have a really big impact on how the business is perceived, and you can start to give them a little bit of an understanding as to how their actual actions, although mundane to them, are really important on a broader scale, they might start to see the bigger picture and find a little bit of motivation about why the small things matter. So I want you to draw the link between what your team does and that bigger picture. Help them understand why what they do is important. And yes, it might seem mundane to them, but help them understand that it's not. I want you to essentially show them that they matter. Now, a lot of times people can feel like a cog in a machine. They're not leading people, they're not implementing broad sweeping organisational change strategy. They're doing what they consider to be mundane things. They don't think that they matter. So show them how they feed into the big picture. And then, as we discussed in the intro, turn it into a game. I've, as I said, done this to some really great success actually. Make it competitive amongst your staff in a fun way to drive performance. People love games. Right? There's a reason why the gaming industry is one of the biggest industries in the world. People find enjoyment in competition and games, and they love a bit of competitive spirit. So make sure that you harness that. Turn the mundane work into a bit of a competitive game. And then finally, recognize outstanding performance. So one of the silly, simple little things that I do with my team, every 2 weeks we have a team meeting where we catch up with everybody and we just have a talk about the challenges that we're facing and connect with each other. And what I like to do is take note of instances where people have gone above and beyond or performed exceptionally well. And then I essentially just give them a Kit Kat. It's a $2 Kit Kat, and I call it the Kit Kat Award. And if you've done something, that stood out to me or you went above and beyond, every team meeting, I will dish that Kit Kat out to the employee who has done enough to secure the prestigious Kit Kat Award. And a lot of people would look at that and go, well, what's the point? That's stupid. No, actually, people love being recognised, even at a small, low-key level like that. It's nice to have your manager say, hey, that didn't escape my notice. I saw that you went above and beyond. I'm going to give you some praise in front of the whole team. Thank you for going above and beyond. And I'm going to give you a Kit Kat as well for your trouble. Is it about the Kit Kat? No, it's not about the Kit Kat. It's about the recognition and someone calling out your actions and praising you in front of the team. That's what it's about. It's not about the Kit Kat. The Kit Kat is just something nice to have with your coffee. Now, you can do this in other ways. I have gone so far in the past as printing certificates for Employee of the Month awards. Now, this was with a bit of a younger crew who I thought really needed a little bit more of an intense approach to competition and recognition. They were at times a little hard to motivate, and the context that I'm talking about is things like work orders. Okay, so think the environment that I was working in at the time was a hospital, so we had a lot of work orders that would come through from clinicians and patients and service staff in the hospital. There was 5,000 people at any one time in that hospital, so it was very busy. And our team would get all manner of work orders, replace this light globe, fix this piece of equipment, bring me a chair, remove a chair, this item of furniture is damaged, so on and so forth. Anything you can think of around the furniture, facilities and fixtures sort of setting in a big hospital. Massive workload for these guys. So there was variety, but as people tend to do, sometimes the motivation waned. And we found that the performance was just inconsistent. You'd have some people who would shoot the lights out one week and then weren't so good the next week, and it was just a little bit inconsistent, but also understandable because people are people and things get busy and our motivation levels wane. So I had to figure out a way to make it a bit more fun for the team, and I decided to start recognizing them and calling them out at our team meetings with Employee of the Month awards, essentially. And that would be structured in such a way that we would combine the work order tallies with the outstanding actions and achievement observations. So it'd be a combination of the two. And this person would essentially have their name printed on a certificate. We would then frame it and we would put it on the wall. And everyone would know that when they walk into that room, that person would have their name on a certificate and would say, Joe Bloggs, Employee of the Month, December 2020. And it was just a little piece of recognition, your name on the wall. And in between those awards, so each week, we would print out work order stats for each person by name. All right, so we would have essentially a leaderboard printed out and displayed on the whiteboard, and that would show exactly how many work orders had been responded to and closed per person for the week. And people got very competitive over the management of that leaderboard, as you can imagine. And it was portrayed as a fun thing, by the way. It was never meant to be, hey, let's call out this person for not doing as many as this person. It was meant to be a fun, competitive sort of game. And we found that there was a pretty significant uptick in performance across most people, not all, most people, as a result of implementing that strategy. And it, of course, had another desired effect, which was for those people who perhaps weren't performing as well as we would like them to, it also meant that there was now an added level of accountability, but in a fun, competitive way. So it gave them the motivation to not be seen to be lagging too far behind. And we were able to achieve a uptick in performance simply by making it a bit more fun and gamifying the process, as opposed to having to have a conversation with someone and say, listen, you're not getting through as many work orders that we would like you to. You need to lift your game. Now, we could certainly do that, but I think it's going to be received better if you can make it more of a team-wide, competitive, fun process as a first port of call before you start addressing performance levels specifically. Always best to take the more friendly, non-confrontational approach if you can. And that really made a difference, I thought, in the workplace, and everyone seemed to enjoy it. So in closing, the first thing that you guys need to do is determine how you can actually measure success in your workplace. You guys might work in sales, you might work in an environment like I did where you have physical work orders that you can track and manage. So work out what you can measure to determine success at your work. It may be stat-based, it may not, but make sure if you are going to use stats that you get the whole picture. It's not just about stats. Stats can be manipulated. We certainly don't want a situation where someone is just closing as many work orders as they can, for example, without addressing them correctly, simply because they want to get recognition at the end of a month. So make sure it's a combination of stats and then bigger picture stuff, like going above and beyond with personable, sort of service-oriented things like customer service. And make sure that if it is stat-based, make sure you delve into those stats and find out what they actually represent. We're not interested in tick and flick. We want really meaningful data to base this stuff on. Now, with every team meeting that's held, whatever frequency you're looking at, might be once every 2 weeks, for example, I would encourage you to have some sort of a little reward. The Kit Kat award sounds silly to people, but I think people really appreciate it. So you can have your Employee of the Month structure, and then you can have your more frequent recognition as well under that. It doesn't have to be a big song and dance, just a nice little recognition. And then in closing, as I said, if it is stat-based, the underperformer will have to be okay with their underperformance being there for all to see. And that is really, I think, some of the deeper meaning and the more strategic thinking behind having this in play. It can be a means to an end as well to address poor performance. So guys, I hope that helps. A little bit shorter today than the last episode on entrepreneurial leadership, but I hope that gives you something to go away with and drive performance within your team. As I always do, I'll point you to the show notes, guys. Hit the send us a text link and give us some feedback if you wish to do so. Maybe even suggest a topic that you might like to be discussed in the next episode, and we'll see if we can fit it into our programming. As I always do as well, please subscribe to the show on whatever podcast app you consume this show on. And if you're feeling really generous, leave us a 5-star review. And of course, don't forget to hit the Instagram link and subscribe to us on the show's Instagram page. Until next time, guys, I'll see you later.